The blue flames of the orbital defense station lit up the darkness of space as Captain Veltar watched his world burn from the bridge of his command ship. The Zephyrian Republic had stood for over 300 years as a beacon of peace in this sector of the galaxy, but now everything they had built was turning to ash and metal fragments floating in the void. The Vrak Dominion had come without warning. Their black ships had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of all three Zephyrian systems at exactly the same moment, a coordinated strike that showed months of planning. The insectoid warriors didn't bother with demands or negotiations. They simply began destroying everything in their path with the methodical efficiency that had made them feared. Across a dozen star systems, Veltar's communications officer looked up from her console with tears streaming down her blue-scaled face. "Sir, we're receiving final transmissions from the Helix station." "Commander, Zekvar says they have maybe 10 minutes before the Vrak breach their final defensive line." The captain nodded grimly and turned back to the tactical display that showed the complete picture of their defeat. Red dots representing Vrak warships outnumbered the remaining Zephyrian defenders by nearly 50 to 1. The evacuation ships that had managed to escape the initial assault were carrying less than 30% of the civilian population. Everyone else was trapped on worlds that would soon be nothing but radioactive waste. "Status report on our remaining military assets," Veltar ordered, though he already knew the answer would be devastating. Lieutenant Mordak consulted his readouts with shaking hands. "We have 12 operational warships left across all three systems, sir. The Vrak destroyed our shipyards in the first wave, so we have no way to repair battle damage. Our ammunition stores are running critical, and we've lost contact with most of our ground-based defense networks." Veltar closed his eyes for a moment and thought of his maid and their younglings who were hopefully aboard one of the evacuation transports heading for deep space. The Zephyrian people had always believed that reason and diplomacy could solve any conflict, but the Vrak had never shown interest in anything except conquest and the complete destruction of other species. The bridge shuddered as another wave of Vrak fighters screamed past their position, their energy weapons carving through the hull of a nearby civilian transport. Veltar watched helplessly as the ship broke apart and hundreds of innocent lives were snuffed out in seconds. "Sir," his communications officer called out with sudden urgency, "I'm receiving an encrypted transmission from the High Council. They're ordering us to broadcast an emergency message on all galactic frequencies." Veltar frowned at this unexpected development. "What kind of message?" The young officer's voice was barely above a whisper. "A request for immediate military assistance, sir. They're offering our entire quantum crystal reserves as payment to any species willing to help defend our worlds." The bridge fell silent except for the constant hum of the ship's engines and the distant explosions of dying vessels. Every crew member understood what this meant. The quantum crystals were the most valuable resource in Zephyrian space, worth more than entire star systems. For the High Council to offer them all meant they had accepted that their civilization was about to be completely destroyed. "The crystals represent over 2,000 years of mining operations," Lieutenant Mordak said quietly. "They're worth enough to buy fleets from 100 different species." Veltar activated his command console and began composing the emergency broadcast. He knew that most civilized species would ignore their plea for help. The Vrak Dominion had a reputation for leaving no survivors and for hunting down anyone who interfered with their conquests. No sane government would risk war with such a powerful enemy to save a relatively minor species like the Zephyrians. "Begin broadcasting on all frequencies," he ordered. "Emergency transmission from the Zephyrian Republic to all spacefaring civilizations. We are under attack by the Vrak Dominion and facing complete extinction. Our military forces are overwhelmed, and our civilian populations are being systematically destroyed. We offer our entire quantum crystal reserves, valued at approximately 47 million galactic standard credits, to any species willing to provide immediate military assistance. Please respond if you can help us." The message went out across the galaxy, carried by quantum communication arrays that could reach civilizations thousands of light years away. Veltar knew it would take time for responses to arrive, time they didn't have. The Vrak would complete their conquest within days, maybe hours. As expected, most of the replies that came back were expressions of sympathy with polite refusals. The Altarian Federation wished them well, but couldn't risk war with the Vrak. The Crystalline Collective offered to remember their civilization in their historical archives. The Democratic Union of Spiral Worlds suggested they surrender immediately to minimize casualties. A few smaller species offered token assistance, but nothing that could change the outcome of the battle. The Zephyrians needed a military miracle, not a handful of outdated patrol ships. Then something unexpected happened. A transmission arrived from a species that most galactic civilizations barely acknowledged, the humans of Earth. Veltar had heard of them before, but only in hushed conversations among military officers. They were classified as a Class 12 Deathworld species, which meant they came from a planet so dangerous that most other forms of life couldn't survive there. The message was brief and came from something called the Human Colonial Authority. We have received your distress call and are preparing to respond. Evacuate all civilian populations to a minimum safe distance of 50,000 kilometers from all combat zones. This evacuation is mandatory and must be completed within 72 hours. Compliance with this directive is not optional. Veltar read the message 3 times before he understood what he was seeing. The humans weren't offering to help negotiate a surrender or provide refugee assistance. They were giving orders as if they intended to actively intervene in the conflict. "Sir," his communications officer said with confusion in her voice, "the human transmission indicates they're sending military aid, but our intelligence files show they're barely 2 centuries into space travel. Their technology should be primitive compared to the Vrak." Veltar studied the strange message and felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced in days. Hope. The humans might be a young species with limited technology, but they were responding to a call for help that every major galactic power had ignored. "Begin coordinating the evacuation," he ordered. "If the humans think they can help us, the least we can do is follow their instructions." The evacuation of 3 star systems was a nightmare that Captain Veltar had never imagined possible. Millions of Zephyrian civilians crammed into cargo ships, passenger liners, and converted mining vessels, all fleeing to the mysterious safe distance that the humans had demanded. The refugees moved in a constant stream of desperate families carrying whatever belongings they could manage, their blue faces marked with fear and confusion. "Why do we need to go so far away?" asked Commander Yelkan from the transport ship Peaceful Dawn. His voice carried the exhaustion of someone who had been coordinating evacuations for 60 hours straight without rest. 50,000 kilometers is beyond the range of any weapon system we know about. Veltar checked his tactical displays again and saw that the Vrak forces were still advancing steadily toward the capital world. They seemed puzzled by the massive civilian exodus but made no attempt to pursue the fleeing transports. The insectoid warriors were focused on destroying military targets and infrastructure, apparently confident that they could hunt down any survivors later. "I don't understand it either," Veltar admitted over the secure communication channel, but the humans seemed very serious about this evacuation requirement. Maybe they know something about Vrak tactics that we don't. 3 days after the original SOS broadcast, a new transmission arrived from the Human Colonial Authority. This time the message was even shorter and more cryptic than before. "Aid incoming. Maintain safe distance. Do not approach combat zone under any circumstances. Human vessel arriving in approximately 48 hours. Veltar shared the message with his senior officers and watched their reactions change from confusion to disbelief. Lieutenant Mordak was the first to speak up about what everyone was thinking. "Sir, they're sending a single ship?" he asked. "Our intelligence reports show that the Vrak invasion force consists of over 300 warships, including 12 of their heavy battle cruisers. How can one human vessel make any difference against those numbers?" The captain had been wondering the same thing, but he remembered stories he had heard about Deathworld species and their unusual approach to warfare. Most galactic civilizations fought according to established rules and conventions that had evolved over thousands of years. Species from dangerous planets sometimes had very different ideas about acceptable tactics. "Maybe they're sending a diplomatic vessel," suggested his communications officer. "The humans might have some kind of agreement with the Vrak that we don't know about." Veltar doubted this explanation, but he had no better theories to offer. The human response was unlike anything in the military textbooks he had studied. Every other spacefaring species would have sent either a massive fleet to match the Vrak numbers or nothing at all. Sending a single ship seemed like either supreme confidence or complete insanity. Meanwhile, in Earth's orbital shipyards above the blue and green world that most aliens considered a hell planet, The human colonial authority was preparing their response to the Zephyrian crisis. Admiral Kate Morrison stood in the main briefing room, surrounded by holographic displays showing the tactical situation. In distant space, the Vrak have committed their entire third battle fleet to this operation, she explained, to the assembled officers. Intelligence estimates suggest they plan to strip mine the Zephyrian worlds for resources after eliminating the population. Standard conquest and resource extraction pattern. Captain Luke Harrison studied the enemy force composition with professional interest. He was a tall man with graying hair and scars on his hands from years of military service. His reputation for unconventional tactics had made him both famous and controversial within human military circles. "What kind of timeline are we looking at?" he asked. Admiral Morrison activated a countdown display that showed the remaining time before the Zephyrian capital world would fall to the Vrak assault. 72 hours maximum. Their defense forces are down to single-digit operational units, and the civilians are fleeing to deep space as we requested. The other officers in the room looked uncomfortable with the discussion. Colonel Janet Pierce, the senior Marine commander, finally voiced the concern that everyone shared. "Admiral, we're talking about deploying weapons that violate multiple galactic treaties," she said carefully. "The political consequences of using that kind of technology could be severe." Admiral Morrison nodded grimly and turned to address the full assembly. "The Human Colonial Authority has debated this decision for the past 60 hours. We've concluded that the Zephyrian situation represents an acceptable field test for our experimental systems. The Vrak Dominion has refused all diplomatic contact with human authorities, and their expansion pattern threatens several of our outer colonies." Captain Harrison understood what wasn't being said directly. The humans had been looking for an excuse to demonstrate their military capabilities to the galaxy, and the Zephyrian crisis provided the perfect opportunity. They could test their most advanced weapons against a major military power while appearing to act as humanitarian rescuers. "What's our mission profile?" Harrison asked. The Admiral activated another set of displays that showed technical specifications for the ship that would carry out the operation. "The UHS Retribution has been selected for this mission. She was scheduled for decommission next month, which makes her expendable if things go wrong." The assembled officers studied the ship's specifications with growing amazement. The Retribution had been extensively modified with experimental systems that pushed the boundaries of known physics. Her conventional weapons had been replaced with devices that most civilized species would consider war crimes. "You'll have a volunteer crew of 53 personnel," Admiral Morrison continued. "All of them have been briefed on the nature of this mission and the potential consequences. Chief Engineer Maya Collins will handle the technical systems. Tactical Officer Ryan Brooks will manage the weapons deployment and communications. Specialist Alex Turner will maintain contact with both Earth and the Zephyrian forces." Captain Harrison reviewed the personnel files and mission parameters while considering the enormous risks involved. If the operation succeeded, humanity would announce itself as a major military power in galactic politics. If it failed, Earth could face retaliation from species that preferred to maintain the current balance of power. "When do we depart?" he asked. 18 hours, Admiral Morrison replied. "The Retribution is being loaded with her special cargo as we speak. Remember that this mission is classified at the highest levels. Even most of your crew won't know the full extent of what they're carrying until you reach the combat zone." The UHS Retribution cut through hyperspace toward the dying Zephyrian systems, while Captain Luke Harrison called his senior staff to the secure briefing room. The ship had been traveling for 36 hours, and most of the crew still believed they were on a standard rescue mission to evacuate alien refugees. Only Harrison and 3 other officers knew the true nature of their cargo and the real purpose of their journey. Chief Engineer Maya Collins was the first to arrive at the meeting, her dark hair tied back and her uniform showing grease stains from working in the ship's modified engine compartments. She had spent years developing the experimental systems that now filled the Retribution's cargo bays, but this would be her first chance to see them used in actual combat conditions. Tactical Officer Ryan Brooks entered next, carrying a datapad loaded with classified weapon specifications that he had been studying during the journey. The young officer had graduated at the top of his class from the Naval War College, but his textbook knowledge was about to be tested against enemies that fought by very different rules than human opponents. Communications Specialist Alex Turner was last to join the briefing. his face showing the strain of monitoring dozens of alien communication channels while trying to understand the tactical situation they were flying toward. He had been listening to Zephyrian distress calls and Vrak military transmissions for hours, building a picture of a one-sided massacre that was almost complete. "Close and lock the door," Harrison ordered as he activated the room's security systems to prevent any electronic surveillance. "What I'm about to tell you is classified beyond top secret, and it will determine whether this mission succeeds or fails." The three officers took their seats around the small table, while Harrison brought up holographic displays showing the ship's true cargo manifest. The items listed there made Maya Collins whistle softly under her breath, while Ryan Brooks went pale as he realized what they were carrying. "The Retribution is equipped with 3 primary weapon systems that have never been used in combat," Harrison began. "Each one of these systems violates multiple galactic warfare treaties, and their use will likely change how other species view humanity forever." He activated the first display, which showed technical specifications for something called a quantum destabilizer. This device can create localized distortions in space-time that trap enemy vessels in temporal loops. Ships caught in these distortions experience time at a different rate than the surrounding universe, effectively removing them from the battle without actually destroying them. Alex Turner leaned forward to study the readouts with growing concern. "Sir, the ethical implications of this technology are enormous. We're talking about trapping enemy crews in a form of temporal prison." Harrison nodded grimly. "The weapon was designed as a non-lethal alternative to conventional ship-to-ship combat. But you're right that the moral questions are complicated. The crews trapped in temporal distortions will experience only minutes while years pass in normal space-time." The captain activated the second display, revealing specifications for adaptive nanite swarms that could consume any material they encountered. Maya Collins recognized the technology immediately, since she had helped design the containment systems that kept the nanites dormant during transport. These nanites are programmed to target specific molecular signatures found in Vrak ship construction materials, she explained to the others. Once released, they'll spread throughout enemy vessels and break down their hull plating, weapon systems, and life support equipment at the molecular level. Ryan Brooks studied the tactical applications while trying not to think about what would happen to enemy crew members caught aboard ships being consumed by nanite swarms. How do we control them once they're deployed? What prevents them from consuming everything in the area? Maya activated additional technical displays that showed the nanites' programming parameters. They have built-in termination codes that activate after 72 hours, and they're designed to ignore any materials not found in Vrak technology. But you're right to be concerned about collateral damage. Harrison moved to the third and most disturbing weapon system, something that the files simply labeled as an adaptive virus package. Alex Turner read through the specifications with mounting horror as he realized what the humans had created. This is a collection of computer viruses specifically designed to infiltrate Vrak communication networks and turn their own technology against them, Harrison explained. The viruses can take control of enemy weapon systems, navigation computers, and life support networks. The communications specialist looked up from the technical readouts with obvious distress. "Captain, this technology could spread beyond the immediate target area and affect neutral species that use similar computer systems. We're talking about unleashing digital weapons that could destroy entire civilizations." Harrison deactivated the displays and looked at each of his officers in turn. "I want you all to understand that using these weapons will make humanity feared throughout the galaxy. Other species will see us as a threat that needs to be contained or eliminated. But if we don't act now, the Zephyrian people will be completely destroyed, and the Vrak will continue expanding until they threaten Earth itself." Maya Collins was the first to speak up after several minutes of uncomfortable silence. "Sir, I helped design these systems because I believed they could save human lives in future conflicts. But seeing the specifications all together like this, I'm not sure we have the right to use weapons that other species consider war crimes." Ryan Brooks nodded in agreement. The tactical advantages are obvious, but the strategic consequences could be disastrous. If other civilizations decide that humanity is too dangerous to coexist with, we could face a galaxy-wide alliance against Earth. Alex Turner was studying long-range sensor data that showed the current situation in Zephyrian space. The latest reports indicate that the Vrak have almost finished their conquest. Millions of civilians are already dead, and the remaining military forces will be eliminated within hours. If we're going to act, it has to be now. Harrison stood up and walked to the small viewport that showed the swirling colors of hyperspace rushing past the ship. I've been thinking about this decision for the entire journey, and I keep coming back to one simple question. What kind of species do we want to be? He turned back to face his officers. We can follow galactic conventions and fight a clean war that we'll certainly lose, or we can use every advantage we have to save innocent lives and protect our own interests. The choice we make here will define humanity's place in the galaxy for generations to come. The UHS Retribution dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zephyrian system, and Captain Luke Harrison immediately understood why the galaxy feared his species. The tactical display showed over 200 Vrak warships arranged in perfect formation around the dying worlds, their black hulls gleaming with the reflected light of burning cities. The insectoid empire had turned the conquest into an art form, systematically destroying everything that had taken the Zephyrians centuries to build. Communications. Open a channel to the Vrak fleet commander, Harrison ordered as he studied the enemy positions. Let's see if they're interested in negotiating a withdrawal. Alex Turner worked at his console for several minutes before shaking his head. Sir, the Vrak are ignoring all communication attempts. Their standard operating procedure seems to be no contact with other species during active military operations. Harrison had expected this response, but he wanted to follow proper diplomatic protocols before unleashing weapons that would change the nature of galactic warfare forever. He activated the ship's intercom system to address the entire crew. All hands, this is the captain speaking. We have arrived at our destination and are beginning combat operations against the Vrak Dominion forces. Our mission is to eliminate the enemy fleet and protect the Zephyrian civilian population. Use of experimental weapon systems is authorized under Earth Colonial Authority Directive 77 Alpha. The crew had been wondering about their mysterious cargo throughout the journey, and now they began to understand why their ship had been loaded with equipment that most of them had never seen before. Chief Engineer Maya Collins activated the quantum destabilizer from her position in the engineering section, while Tactical Officer Ryan Brooks prepared the nanite delivery systems at the Veltar watched from his refugee transport 55,000 kilometers away as the single human vessel approached, the massive Vrak fleet. The Zephyrian officer had seen many battles during his career, but he had never witnessed anything like what was about to happen. The human ship is moving toward the Vrak formation, reported his sensor operator with obvious confusion. But sir, they're not deploying any visible weapons or launching fighter craft. Their energy signatures don't match any known combat systems. Veltar studied his own tactical displays and felt a growing sense of unease. The humans had demanded a massive evacuation to an unprecedented safe distance, but their lone ship appeared to be approaching the enemy with no apparent plan for engaging such overwhelming numbers. The Vrak fleet commander, War Prime Zekthul, noticed the approaching human vessel and transmitted orders to his subordinates. The insectoid warrior had conquered 14 star systems for the Dominion, and had never encountered a species foolish enough to challenge his forces with a single ship. He ordered 3 of his heavy cruisers to intercept and destroy the intruder before continuing with the systematic destruction of the Zephyrian world's captain. Harrison watched the Vrak ship's changing course to intercept his vessel and activated his first weapon system. Engineering, deploy quantum destabilizer. Target the 3 approaching heavy cruisers. Maya Collins initiated the firing sequence from her console in the ship's modified cargo bay. The quantum destabilizer created an invisible field of distorted space-time that expanded outward from the Retribution at nearly the speed of light. When the field reached the Vrak ships, reality seemed to bend around their hulls like water flowing around stones. The 3 heavy cruisers suddenly stopped moving relative to the rest of the universe. Their crews continued to experience time normally from their perspective, but to outside observers, the ships had become frozen in place like insects trapped in amber. The Vrak vessels would remain locked in temporal distortion for the next several 100 years while only minutes passed aboard their ships. War Prime Zekthul watched his 3 heavy cruisers disappear from his tactical displays and felt something he had never experienced before: confusion. The enemy weapon had produced no visible energy discharge and no explosive effects, but his ships were simply gone from the battle. His insectoid mind struggled to understand how such a thing was possible. All vessels, Converge on the human ship and destroy it immediately, he ordered through the fleet communication system. Use maximum firepower and allow no survivors. Harrison saw the entire Vrak fleet turning toward his position and activated his second weapon system. Tactical: deploy adaptive nanites. Target the enemy supply ships and logistics vessels first. Ryan Brooks launched a series of small containers from the Retribution's modified torpedo tubes. The containers looked harmless as they drifted toward the Vrak formation, but each one carried billions of microscopic machines programmed to consume specific molecular structures found in enemy technology. The nanite containers reached the Vrak supply convoy and opened automatically, releasing their deadly cargo into space. The nanites immediately began seeking out their target materials and reproducing themselves using the resources they consumed. Within minutes, the first enemy supply ship began to dissolve as its hull plating was consumed at the molecular level. War Prime Zek Thul received panicked reports from his supply commanders as their vessels began disintegrating around their crews. The nanites spread from ship to ship through physical contact, creating a chain reaction that consumed everything they touched. Entire squadrons of support vessels simply vanished as their matter was converted into more nanites. Communications: release the adaptive virus package into the Vrak network, Harrison ordered as he watched enemy ships disappearing from his tactical display. Target their command and control systems first. Alex Turner transmitted a series of seemingly harmless data packets toward the enemy fleet. The packets were actually sophisticated computer viruses designed to infiltrate alien technology and turn it against its users. The viruses spread through the Vrak communication network faster than their security systems could respond. Within hours, Vrak weapons began firing on their own ships as the viruses took control of targeting systems. Navigation computers guided vessels into collision courses with their fleetmates. Life support systems began venting atmosphere into space while artificial intelligence networks reported false sensor data to their organic commanders. Captain Veltar watched in amazement as the massive Vrak invasion fleet began destroying itself. Ships exploded without warning. Others simply drifted away from their formations with no apparent crew control, and many vessels seemed to be attacking their own allies. The methodical conquest that had been proceeding like clockwork suddenly became chaos. What kind of weapons are the humans using? His sensor operator asked with obvious fear in his voice. I'm not detecting any conventional energy discharges or missile launches, but the entire Vrak fleet is being destroyed. Veltar had no answer to give because he was witnessing something that challenged everything he thought he knew about warfare and technology. The battle for the Zephyrian system ended not with explosions or the roar of engines, but with an eerie silence that stretched across space as the last Vrak warship drifted powerless through the debris field that had once been their mighty invasion fleet. Captain Luke Harrison stood on the bridge of the UHS Retribution and watched his tactical displays show empty space where over 200 enemy vessels had been just 72 hours earlier. Final status report. Harrison requested as his crew completed their damage assessments and weapon system shutdowns. Chief Engineer Maya Collins consulted her readouts with something approaching disbelief in her voice. All experimental weapons performed within expected parameters, sir. The quantum destabilizer trapped 47 enemy vessels in temporal distortion fields. The adaptive nanites consumed 112 ships before reaching their program termination time. The virus package caused 38 vessels to destroy themselves through friendly fire incidents. Tactical Officer Ryan Brooks added his own numbers to the grim accounting. Confirmed Vrak casualties include their entire logistics train, most of their heavy combat units, and all command vessels. The surviving ships have fled the system, but our long-range sensors indicate they're broadcasting warning messages about human combat capabilities to other Dominion forces. Communications specialist Alex Turner looked up from his console with an expression of mixed relief and concern. Captain, I'm receiving transmission requests from over 40 different species who monitored our engagement. Word about what happened here is spreading throughout this entire sector of the galaxy. Harrison nodded as he considered the implications of their victory. The mission had succeeded beyond their most optimistic projections, but success came with consequences that would reshape humanity's relationship with every other spacefaring civilization. The galaxy now knew that the species from the dangerous blue world possessed weapons that could destroy fleets without firing a single conventional shot. Captain Veltar piloted his transport back toward the liberated Zephyrian worlds, but his mind kept returning to the impossible things he had witnessed. The human ship had eliminated an entire invasion, fleet using methods that seemed to violate the basic laws of physics and warfare that every civilized species understood, sir. His communications officer reported, "We're receiving a transmission from the human captain. He's requesting permission to meet with senior Zephyrian leadership to discuss the situation." Veltar authorized the meeting and prepared to face the beings who had saved his people using weapons that terrified him more than the Vrak had ever managed. The transport docked with the UHS Retribution 6 hours later, and the Zephyrian captain found himself walking through corridors that looked deceptively normal despite containing technology that could reshape reality itself. Captain Harrison met his alien counterpart in the ship's main conference room, where holographic displays showed the current status of the 3 Zephyrian systems. The damage from the Vrak invasion was extensive, but the surviving populations could begin rebuilding their civilization now that the immediate threat had been eliminated. "Captain Veltar," Harrison began, "my government wants you to know that humanity acted to prevent the extinction of your people, because we believe the galaxy should be a place where civilized species can coexist peacefully." The Zephyrian officer studied the human's face and tried to reconcile this diplomatic language with the devastating weapons that had just been demonstrated. "Captain Harrison, my people are grateful for your intervention, but we must discuss the nature of the weapons you used against the Vrak. The Galactic community has treaties that prohibit many of the technologies we observed during the battle." Harrison activated a holographic display that showed current political boundaries throughout this region of space. Those treaties were written by species that have never faced extinction at the hands of enemies like the Vrak Dominion. Humanity reserves the right to use whatever methods are necessary to protect innocent lives and maintain galactic stability. Veltar felt a chill as he realized the full implications of the human position. "Are you saying that your species will continue to use these weapons in future conflicts?" The human captain's expression remained carefully neutral. "We're saying that humanity will respond to threats against ourselves or our allies, using whatever level of force we deem appropriate. The Vrak learned that there are consequences for attempting genocide against species under human protection." The conversation was interrupted by an incoming transmission from the Zephyrian High Council, who had been monitoring the discussion from their emergency government facilities. Council Leader Morthek appeared as a hologram and addressed both captains with obvious relief and lingering fear. "Captain Harrison, the Zephyrian people offer you our deepest gratitude for saving our civilization from complete destruction. As promised, our quantum crystal reserves are yours as payment for your assistance." Harrison shook his head politely. "The Human Colonial Authority doesn't require payment for preventing genocide, Council Leader. However, we would appreciate detailed information about Vrak military capabilities, territorial boundaries, and any intelligence you've gathered about other potentially hostile species in this region." Veltar understood immediately what the humans were really asking for. They wanted strategic intelligence that would help them evaluate future threats and plan additional interventions. The Deathworld species wasn't just offering protection to the Zephyrians, they were establishing themselves as a major power in galactic politics. "We'll provide everything we know about regional threats and military capabilities," Council Leader Morthek agreed. "But Captain Harrison, I must ask what your people expect from us in return for this protection." The human officer considered the question carefully before responding. "We expect the Zephyrian Republic to remember that humanity answered your call for help when every other major power in the galaxy refused. We expect you to share information about technological developments and potential threats. Most importantly, we expect you to understand that the galaxy is changing, and species will need to choose whether they want humanity as an ally or as a distant neighbor." The message was clear to everyone in the room. The humans had announced their arrival as a galactic power by demonstrating weapons that made conventional warfare obsolete. Other species would now have to decide how to respond to neighbors who could eliminate entire fleets without warning and who were willing to use such weapons to protect their interests. Admiral Kate Morrison received Captain Harrison's mission report 3 days later at Earth's colonial headquarters. The successful field test of experimental weapons had exceeded all expectations, but the political consequences were already becoming apparent. Over a dozen species had requested emergency meetings to discuss humanity's new military capabilities, while others were forming defensive alliances against the potential threat from the Deathworld species. The galaxy had learned that when Deathworlders responded to an SOS call, they didn't send aid in any conventional sense. They sent a message written in the molecular remains of their enemies' fleets, and that message would echo through space for generations to come.